Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. More North Koreans are on their way, this time a 280-person group, including a cheerleading squad, a taekwondo team and members of the state-run media. It's the final batch before the North's high-profile delegation arrives on Friday for the opening day of the Winter Olympics. The US and North Korea accuse each other of presenting a nuclear threat to the world at a meeting in Geneva. Could the uptick in rhetoric threaten South Korea's plan for a peace Olympics? Plus, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake jolts Taiwan, killing at least 2 people and injuring more than 100. Authorities dispatch rescue teams as they scramble to find survivors. So, let's start with the latest arrivals from North Korea as the clock ticks down to the opening ceremony of the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang. Within the past hour, almost 300 North Koreans have crossed the Customs, Immigration and Quarantine Office at Dorasan Station just south of the border. Our Jim Young-gil has the details.
A North Korean delegation of 280 members led by Pyongyang's Sports Minister Kim Il-guk arrived in South Korea on Wednesday morning. The delegation is comprised of 4 officials from the North National Olympic Committee, 229 cheerleaders, 26 taekwondo demonstrators, and 21 journalists. North Korea's cheering squad, popularly known as Army of Beauties, will be attending and cheering at Olympic matches that have either South or North Korean athletes competing. Their routine includes singing, dancing, and sometimes using fans as props to bring out more cheers and excitement among spectators. The North cheerleaders first appeared at the 2002 Asian Games in Busan. The North Taekwondo team will conduct joint performances with South Korean counterparts in the host cities of PyeongChang and Sokcho, as well as in the South Korean capital of Seoul. On Friday, Pyongyang will send a 22-member high-level delegation to South Korea led by the regime's ceremonial head of state, Kim Yong-nam, for a 3-day visit. Kim, who is the head of parliament in North Korea, will attend the PyeongChang opening ceremony, which will also be attended by U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. Kim will be the highest-level North Korean official to visit the South in 4 years. While in the South, the high-level delegation will likely attend the United Korean women's ice hockey team's match on Saturday and even possibly meet with President Jaein. The North participation in the Games is widely seen as a diplomatic maneuver by Pyongyang as it faces growing international pressure and sanctions over its ongoing nuclear and missile provocations. Jim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And staying with the arrival of North Koreans prior to the Olympics, to open up waterways to let a North Korean ship south of the border on Tuesday, the South Korean government had to temporarily lift some sanctions on the regime. Seoul may even go a step further by providing food to the people on that ferry and keeping the vessel topped up with oil and a steady supply of electricity. Oh Jung-hee reports.
The South Korean government says it might provide some essential support like food, fuel, and electricity to the North Korean ferry while it's docked at Mukho. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, a Unification Ministry official said Seoul will follow the precedent of what it did during the 2002 Asian Games in Busan. That's when the same ferry, Mangyongbong 92, made its way to South Korea with cheerleaders on board. Experts say this will not violate international sanctions as long as the food isn't from America and the fuel is reported beforehand to the UN Security Council.
The UN sanctions resolution bans the provision of fuel, but we know that this is for the convenience of the artists and others on board the ferry, so it would be hard to call this a violation.
There has already been controversy over whether the Mangyongbong 92's entry into the South Korean port violates Seoul's own unilateral sanctions. the May 24th measure. Adopted in 2010 after a North Korean submarine torpedoed and sank the South Korean warship Cheonan, the measure banned North Korean ships from entering South Korean waters. Seoul decided to make an exception for the Mangyongbong 92, implying that it does not plan on lifting the sanctions. But experts think Pyongyang did have a reason to some extent for choosing a ferry this time.
Maybe North Korean government wants to see how South Korean government would respond if they change the method of transportation to the Mangyongbong, because now they believe that South Korean government would not oppose even if North Korea changed their method of transportation, because they know that South Korean government wanted to continue the dialogue with the North Korea.
South Korea's Unification Ministry explained that North Korea has not asked for material support and that nothing has been decided. It added that Seoul will closely cooperate with the international community to prevent any friction over perceived sanction violations. 오정희, Arirang News.
And while guests from north of the border and around the rest of the world are on their way to the host nation of the Winter Olympics, with it just a couple of days away, other countries in the region are pushing for more than just sports diplomacy. Meeting in Tokyo on Tuesday, the top nuclear envoys of the US and Japan agreed to keep maximum pressure on North Korea until the regime ultimately abandons its nuclear program. Japan's foreign ministry said that while the two welcomed the surprise breakthrough between the two Koreas for a successful PyeongChang Winter Olympics, they will continue to punish the regime through the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. Now, on the same day in Moscow, the top diplomats of Russia and North Korea talked about bilateral cooperation, marking the 70th anniversary of their diplomatic ties. Though no further details have been released, it's largely speculated the two could have discussed the recent inter-Korean talks as well as strengthening their ties amid escalating international condemnation against the regime. US Vice President Mike Pence has arrived in Japan, where he will stop over before heading to South Korea on Thursday in time for the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. In Tokyo today, he's set to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, where they are expected to talk about North Korea. A joint press conference will be held afterwards, and they will likely issue a strong message to increase pressure on the regime. Then, on Thursday, when he arrives in South Korea, Pence will meet with President Moon Jae-in. Further discussions on North Korea are expected before they head to Pyeongchang on Friday to attend the opening ceremony of the Olympics. The US Vice President has not ruled out the possibility of meeting with North Korean officials also at the opening ceremony, but formal sit-down talks are considered unlikely. And the US and North Korea have once again been trading rather aggressive barbs with one another, accusing the other side of ratcheting up tensions on the Korean peninsula. The two sides exchanged some verbal blows in Geneva on Tuesday, with the US representative saying the regime might be able to hit the mainland United States with a nuclear-tipped missile within months. Lee Seung-jae reports.
North Korea is only months away from obtaining the capability to hit U.S. territory with a nuclear weapon. This isn't the first time a U.S. official has warned of North Korea's nuclear capabilities, but the North responded this time by blaming Washington for escalating tensions, adding the U.S. is considering a preemptive strike against Pyongyang. All this happening in Geneva Tuesday at a UN-sponsored conference on disarmament. Robert Wood, a U.S. permanent representative to the Conference on Disarmament, who was especially vocal at the conference, called North Korea's peaceful actions before the PyeongChang Winter Olympics nothing more than an act, stressing that the situation on the Korean peninsula remains as volatile as ever.
The situation on the Korean peninsula has not changed. The regime continues work on its ballistic missile and nuclear programs. What I would call charm offensive, frankly, is fooling no one.
Ju Young-chul, The North Korean diplomat at the conference didn't shy away from accusing the U.S. of using the North's missile and nuclear programs as an excuse for a possible preemptive strike on the regime.
U.S. officials, including Defense Secretary and the CIA Director, repeatedly talked about DPRK nuclear and missile threat to justify their argument for military option, and the new concept of so-called bloody nose limited preemptive strike on the DPRK is under consideration within the U.S. administration.
Elsewhere, with the U.S. recently issuing its 2018 nuclear posture review, China's foreign ministry stated that Washington is hanging on to its Cold War mentality and that policy deviates from peace and development. Referring to the fact that the U.S. has the world's biggest and most advanced nuclear arsenal, Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Gang Shuang added the U.S. move to increase its nuclear power would lead to a global strategic imbalance. During a congressional meeting on Tuesday, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis voiced his concerns over the North's nuclear program, stating that its nuclear program is a threat to global security. Mattis added that along with North Korea, Russia and China have been advancing their nuclear programs, while the U.S. has remained the same. With the Winter Games in South Korea just a couple of days away, many wonder if the latest verbal tit-for-tat between the U.S. and North Korea will negatively impact the South's goal of holding a Peace Olympics. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And with the opening ceremony just over 48 hours away now, President Moon Jae-in is meeting with the Governor-General of Canada, Julie Payette, as we speak. According to the Blue House, Canada's Governor-General represents the head of the state of Canada, which is the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. Payette, who is visiting Korea for the first time, is scheduled to attend the opening ceremony on Friday evening and watch several competitions during her stay. Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start with a powerful 6.4 magnitude earthquake that has jolted Taiwan. Tuesday's tremor in the eastern part of the country has toppled buildings, leaving at least 2 people dead and more than 100 injured. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's check in with our No Adam. So Adam, just exactly how bad is it looking?
Well, Mark, rescuers are desperately searching for any survivors that may be trapped under the collapsed buildings, which include a 10-story hotel as well as a residential building. About a couple dozen people are said to have been rescued from the rubble so far. Buildings that haven't yet been toppled are close to doing so as the 6.4 magnitude quake left them tilting. The government has also said that 2 bridges in the city were either cracked or could not be used. The U.S. Geological Survey said Tuesday night's quake struck about 20 kilometers northeast of Hualien on the island's east coast. It shook at a depth of about 9.5 kilometers, and a tsunami warning is yet to be issued. Taiwan is prone to earthquakes as it sits along the famed Pacific Rim of Fire, known for frequent seismic activity. Tuesday's quake followed a 6.1 magnitude tremor over the weekend and also fell on the 2nd anniversary of a 6.4 quake in southern Taiwan that killed nearly 120 people. Hong Kong's highest court freed 3 young pro-democracy activists on Tuesday, overturning their prison sentences for unlawful assembly. Joshua Wong, Nathan Law and Alex Chow had been convicted for leading the so-called Umbrella Movement demonstrations in 2014, which were protesting against a more authoritarian China. They were initially given community service terms, but the government in Hong Kong controversially appealed for harsher punishment, sparking outrage among rights groups. Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal eventually sided with the 3 activists, but the court's Chief Justice warned of stricter penalties, including imprisonment for future offences relating to illegal protests. SpaceX has successfully completed its first launch of the world's most powerful commercial rocket. It marks a successful beginning to CEO Elon Musk's most ambitious project yet. Our Park So-yeon has the details.
Elon Musk and his SpaceX company took a giant leap forward for the space industry on Tuesday, launching the most powerful rocket the world has ever seen. Carrying a cherry-red Tesla Roadster, Falcon Heavy took off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 3:45 p.m. Tuesday local time. A mannequin wearing a SpaceX spacesuit was strapped inside the car. The two side boosters detached and headed back to Earth about 2.5 minutes after the launch. Thousands of people gathered at the Space Center to witness the moment, the culmination of a 5-year plan. SpaceX used the Falcon Heavy, standing more than 21 stories tall, to send the vehicle into orbit using technology with twice the launching power of any existing rocket. The Falcon Heavy consists of 3 Falcon 9 rockets joined together, boasting 27 engines, and the rocket creates a combined 2.3 million kilograms of thrust, the equivalent of about 18 Boeing 747s at takeoff. SpaceX says the rocket will one day be used to send humans to Mars. If this voyage is successful, it could raise interesting possibilities for future innovation, including larger U.S. satellites and the launching of hundreds of satellites into space to give broader internet access to the developing world. This development also gives rise to a huge improvement in space exploration and will enable Musk to fulfill his dream of sending people and larger robots to the Red Planet. Experts say the launch will open up a world of opportunities and marks a huge step forward for the rocket industry. Park So-yeon, Arirang News.
Now it's the third and final day of the parliamentary interpellation session at the National Assembly. Today, top government officials will be grilled on matters regarding education, culture and social issues. Among some key agendas, rival parties are expected to clash over the creation of an independent body that will be tasked with probing ranking government officials, lawmakers or even the president. The ruling party says it's needed to curb irregularities, while the opposition says it will just become another organ of power. Another area of dispute is the fielding of a joint Korean women's ice hockey team during the Olympics, with the opposition likely to criticize the government for what it claims is incompetence in preparing for the Games overall. Now, in time, with the release of its vice chairman from jail, Samsung Electronics may be speeding things up a touch. The Korean tech giant is pushing to build a second chip production line in Pyeongtaek as it anticipates rising demand for semiconductors after a year of positive earnings, thanks in large part to its record-breaking chip business. Though no specific size or timing of investment has been decided yet, the matter could be brought up at a meeting scheduled for today. If confirmed, it will be Samsung's first major investment since Lee Jae-yong won early release from prison after appealing his sentence over a bribery scandal linked to the former president. Samsung started mass production at its new semiconductor line in Pyeongtaek last July and was initially focused on producing the company's fourth-generation chip products. The Korea International Trade Association has released a report on South Korea's export competitiveness. When it comes to the number of export items the nation has global dominance in, South Korea currently sits in 13th spot. Kim Hae-sung with the details.
Korea is leading the global export market in 71 different items as of 2016, adding 3 more items from the year before. That's according to the Korea International Trade Association, which said, in fact, that Korea ranked 13th in the world in terms of the number of exports in which it's the market leader. 2016 was also the first time since 2010 that Korea topped the market in more than 70 items. More than half of those were in chemicals and steel. New at the top of the list were naval ships and welding machines. It's encouraging news for Korea, with half of its GDP coming from exports, but in many of the items, Korea was competing with its main trading partners. In 16 products, Korea had a market share less than 5 percentage points bigger than its closest competitors, with fierce competition coming from the U.S. in chemical products and from Japan and Germany in steel products. China topping the market with close to 1,700 items, ranked number 1, a position it's held since 2005. Also in the top 6 were Germany, the U.S., Italy, Japan, and India, each with more than 150 items. The reports noted that Korea's competitors are closing the gap in terms of its main exports, so it emphasized the need for Korea to come up with more high value-added goods and pursue a strategy of differentiation. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is advising Korean nationals to avoid visiting the Maldives due to the deepening political instability on those islands. The Foreign Ministry says the South Korean embassy in Sri Lanka that handles consular services for Koreans visiting the country has called on South Koreans living in the Maldives to take extra caution following the local government's declaration of a state of emergency earlier this week. The ministry also relayed the message to Koreans travelling to the Maldives to avoid visiting the country's capital, Malé, saying safety alerts have also been issued through diplomatic missions and on social media. Now, more victims of sexual harassment in Korea are breaking their silence. Involving more members of the prosecution, the government is taking strong action to prevent women having to endure such encounters in the workplace and to help those who want to come forward. Our Park Hee-jun has more.
Following the testimony of prosecutor Seo Ji-hyun, who was a victim of sexual assault within the prosecution office, more victims are coming forward, further kindling the worldwide Me Too movement in Korea. Lee Moon-jung, a prosecutor at the Seoul Northern Prosecutor's Office, also came forward and shared her traumatic experience. She said she was a victim of sexual assault twice in 2003 and in 2005 by her superiors. Upon reporting the assaults, she was verbally abused and her career suffered a great deal. The stories of Seo and Im were not the first, nor will they be the last cases of harassment and assault that women suffer in private firms, the film industry, and even public offices on a daily basis. Women have spoken before, many times for that matter, and seems like for once, the voice of victims have been heard and received the necessary spotlight to prompt the government to take strong action. During a meeting with his top officials on Monday, President Moon Jae-in said the cases of sexual misconduct were not handled appropriately and asked officials to make their utmost efforts to prevent such behavior from taking place at the workplace again.
아울러 정부는 직장 내 성희롱, 성폭력 근절에 대해 이번 기회에 끝을 본다는 비상한 각오로 임해주기 바랍니다.
Following the president's remark, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun on Tuesday called for a thorough probe into all the allegations, calling the harassment cases at the prosecution office the agency's worst crisis.
I believe this is the prosecution's worst ever crisis. I ask the prosecution staking its honor, no, even its existence, to find out the truth about these accusations and take appropriate action.
He also ordered the Gender Equality Ministry and other relevant government offices to spare no effort to prevent victims or whistleblowers from being retaliated against, and to investigate all cases of sexual misconduct at government and public organizations. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Good morning. Today's conditions are going to be pretty much a repeat of yesterday's. Another bone-chilling morning with freezing afternoon highs here in the capital. But the cold snap will finally show signs of easing from tomorrow before it makes another return on Sunday. And checking on today's afternoon highs, Seoul will only make it to -3 degrees Celsius, while southern provinces will see highs in the positive territory this afternoon. And those of you in Pyeongchang woke up to icy cold conditions of around -20 degrees this morning. But the cold will ease starting tomorrow and will have much more bearable temperatures just in time for the opening ceremony on Friday. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While cold wave alerts are in place across much of the country, along with more than 110 centimeters of heavy snow in Ulleungdo here in South Korea, many areas in North Korea are enduring a brutally cold winter under mostly sunny skies. And as for the rest of Asia, those of you in Beijing had a very cold morning, and strong winds will only add more chill to the air. Meanwhile, those of you in Melbourne got a break from the scorching hot weather, but summer is back with highs rising to the mid to upper 30s. And heading to North America, more snow is forecast on Wednesday in Montreal, and the temperature will be cold with the storm likely remaining in the minus 10 degrees Celsius range on Wednesday. And as for South America, Sao Paulo will get a break from the rain, so enjoy the sunshine while it's here. Taking you to Europe, those of you in Stockholm will see nicer weather along with a tad higher ratings than Tuesday, and the cold snap will ease from Thursday. Lastly, to Africa, Algiers will have another rainy day. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave the news for now as well on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time, so until then, goodbye.
A village full of exciting sports. It's Pyeongchang. Shall we take a look inside the ice kingdom of sports? Becoming one with the ice. Down we go through the ice track. Wow, how thrilling the speed on ice. It's the Iron Man of winter sports, sliding sports. Where passion meets the world, PyeongChang, Arirang.
경기도 불객이공 우처사